This is what we've been waiting for. Let's go.
This is you've been waiting for.
Let's switch. I've been waiting for. Come on, hold your hand if you need me.
In 1750, Adolf Phillips, the lord of this manor, well, he dies. He's 85 years old. He lived a long life. When he died, somebody has to basically make an inventory of everything that he owns. Have you heard about an inventory?
Yes.
You guys can make an inventory of everything you own as well. If you think about it, go in your rooms, think about everything you got, put it down on a list. That's an inventory, noting everything you have. Mr. Phillips's inventory in 1750 was 55 pages long. Now that's maybe 54 pages longer than most people would have had. Most people couldn't fill up a page worth of stuff back then in the 1750s. 55 pages. This that you see here is page 1 of that inventory. And as you see, and you guys are familiar with this, what's the first thing listed on this inventory? Who are the names of? Yep, Caesar, Diamond, Samson. These were the enslaved men, women, and children that lived here at Philipsburg. And they're on a list of property. And so you guys have learned already that enslaved individuals were considered property in the 1750s. Things that could be on the list. And what's listed below the names of the people? Right? Oxen, cows, sheep, horses, things like that. And the next page of that document is all the silverware that's listed, and then various other furniture and linens and clothing and things like that. This document tells us a lot about these individuals.
Those 5 enslaved women on that list, this is where they spent their entire lives, in this room. 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. They were making butter. And butter was one of those commodities, one of those things that was being exported down to the Caribbean islands, right along with all the flour. When you get into the mill, you learn about Caesar, who was the master miller here, one of the enslaved men, the first man on that list. So flour and butter were being traded for sugar. And sugar was like gold in the colonial times. That's how the Phillipses got as rich as they were. It was all in that sugar trade, okay? So of course the first thing they would have to do is milk cows. And they had to carry all the milk into this room. This was probably the hardest part. This was extremely heavy, full of milk. And this is called a yoke. Will you be my shower offer on how this works? Turn around, honey. Okay. Pretty heavy by itself, right? Yeah. This would have been close to 50 pounds on the shoulders. And it might be 24 trips a day coming in with something like
By
this.
the ladies?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
And maybe some teenagers around would be helping out with this too.
Mr. Phillips, the person that takes over for him is his nephew. He doesn't want the site. He's looking to sell it. And he puts advertisements in the newspaper for an auction, what they called a vendu in Dutch. But it was an auction that tried to sell about 15 of these people in April of 1750. They put them up on an auction block and they tried to sell people off. Not all 15 were sold, but there was one boy that was sold that day. His name was Sam. He's listed right here on the document. He's 8 years old. And Sam was sold to a man in New York City for 62 pounds, which is the British money system back then. It was a lot of money. An 8-year-old boy. I don't know if you guys have younger brothers and sisters. Try to imagine your 8-year-old brother or sister getting sold away from your family, how that's going to make your parents feel, and your family feel. That's what happened in 1750. This whole community was sort of torn apart. About 9 different people were sold off in the first 6 months of that year. And why? Because these people were considered the property of the Phillips family, and the Phillipses could move them, sell them, and split up families as they saw fit.
There was a stage that was being hammered right out these windows. What were they going to be selling on that stage?
Auction.
That was the auction, the slave auction. That spring day in 1750.
Could you imagine living here all your life and then on that day knowing that you would possibly be sold?
Tragedy struck.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As tragic and as horrible as their lives were, they were together for many generations. They started at 1680 all the way up to 1750. That's many generations. But when the owner dies and everything's being sold, that's when tragedy hits.